This is Lily, a mild-mannered capybara who just wanted a prettier pond. She lives in the Dutch wetlands, a place famous for calm waters, fat reeds, and an unhealthy obsession with beauty. Not beauty of fur or form, but of flowers. Particularly one flower, the tulip. It all began when a merchant otter from faraway eastern marshes arrived with a curious bulb. A strange onion-looking root that when planted produced colours the wetlands had never seen. Scarlet streaks, sunburst yellows, petals flamed with fire. To Lily's ancestors, this was more than a flower. It was status. Only noble capybaras could afford to plant such bulbs around their lily-pad villas. Soon, every merchant, beaver and frog wanted their own patch of colour to show off wealth. Within a few seasons, tulips weren't just flowers. They were assets, symbols, investment portfolios with petals. And just like that, the Dutch wetlands discovered speculation. In the capybara world, leaves were money. The more leaves you had, the bigger your pond, the fancier your raft, the longer your naps in the sun. But as tulip fever spread, something absurd happened. Capybaras stopped trading fish, stopped weaving baskets, stopped doing anything that didn't involve bulbs. Why farm carrots when you could plant a fortune? The price of a single tulip bulb began to climb, slowly at first, then like bamboo in monsoon. Lily's neighbour once traded a cart of fish for one bulb. A week later, that same bulb could buy a pond-front cottage. By the next moon, it was rumoured one bulb sold for the price of a herd of capybaras, and their mud spa included. Everyone was convinced this was the future. They called it the new economy of beauty. Naturally, with so many leaves flying around, the clever capybaras of the wetlands decided to formalise things. They created tulip trading houses, small reed huts filled with loud-mouthed brokers scribbling deals on bark. They introduced futures contracts, where a capybara could buy a bulb not yet bloomed, betting its value would rise by spring. It was genius, or madness. Probably both. Now you didn't even need to own a bulb to make leaves off it. You could buy the right to own a bulb later, then sell that right to another capybara before the flower even existed. Lily watched as her pond neighbours shouted numbers, waved scrolls and compared rare bulb varieties like collectors comparing gemstones. The rarest bulbs had names: Viceroy, Semper Augustus, the Flame of Swamp Eden. Owning one meant you weren't just rich, you were enlightened. The swamp wasn't growing food anymore, it was growing fantasies. At its peak, the frenzy consumed everyone. Tailors sold their looms, fisher cappies sold their boats. Even monks from the reed monastery joined in, whispering prayers that their bulbs might rise again by divine sunlight. The wetlands became a financial carnival. Brokers promised eternal profits. Poets wrote love songs to tulips, and every tavern conversation ended with, "How many bulbs you holding this season?" Lily wasn't immune. She had saved 3 baskets of leaves after years of selling cattail tea, but her friends laughed. "Leaves in a jar, you'll drown in poverty. Put them in tulips." So she did. She bought one bulb, her ticket to prosperity. She buried it near her hut and waited for spring, imagining herself rich enough to buy an entire pond of her own. In simple terms, here's what happened. 1. New idea arrives. Tulips become fashionable and desirable. 2. Early buyers profit. First capybaras make a fortune selling bulbs to latecomers. 3. Hype spreads. Word of easy leaves travels through the wetlands. 4. Everyone joins in. Demand outpaces reality. Prices explode. 5. Delusion peaks. Capybaras stop asking, "What's a tulip worth?" and start saying, "Who cares, it'll be worth more tomorrow." 6. Then comes reality and gravity. A bubble, in economic terms, is when the price of something rises far beyond its true value. Fueled not by need or logic, but by dreams, envy, and fear of missing out. In the tulip case, the bulbs weren't creating more food, homes, or jobs. They were just being passed around like hot potatoes, each buyer hoping the next capybara would pay more. And like all bubbles, it had to burst. One winter evening, in a trading hut near Amsterdam Pond, a deal went wrong. A beaver refused to pay the final price on a bulb contract, claiming the buyer couldn't deliver in time. It was small, trivial, barely worth a squeak, but rumours spread faster than mosquitoes. If one beaver could back out, maybe others would too. If one bulb wasn't worth the price, maybe none of them were. Panic seeped through the reeds. Within days, the wetland's once roaring tulip market went silent. Brokers vanished. Promised payments never arrived. Bulbs that once traded for herds were suddenly worth a basket of pond mud. The bubble had burst, and as always, it burst loudest for those who came in last. Lily's bulb never bloomed. She tried to sell it, but no one wanted tulips anymore. The same capybaras who once shouted prices from rooftops now avoided the subject entirely. Overnight, fortunes evaporated. Huts that had been filled with laughter now echoed with regret. Merchants who had borrowed leaves to buy bulbs found themselves deep in mud debt. Many lost not only their leaves, but their ponds, families, and reputations. The rare bulbs, once guarded like relics, now rotted in warehouses. No one cared for beauty anymore. They just wanted stability. The wetlands entered what historians later called the Great Soggy Recession. So why did this happen? Because capybaras forgot the difference between value and price. Value is what something truly gives you. Shade, food, peace. Price is what someone is willing to pay at a moment of excitement. Tulips had value as flowers, but not as factories of infinite leaves. The wetlands believed in the magic of endless growth, and when belief replaces logic, you get a bubble, shiny, rising, and doomed. Even the capybara scholars later agreed. The tulip bubble wasn't born out of greed alone, but of hope, the dangerous kind that believes nature itself can be traded. To explain this clearly, capybaras used leaf notes, promises written on bark, to buy future bulbs. These were called tulip contracts. Many never saw the actual bulbs. They only traded promises. As more leaves chased the same limited number of bulbs, prices spiraled upward. By early 1637, in swamp years, one bulb of Semper Augustus traded for 12 acres of reedland or 10 years of a fisherman's wages. At that point, the market wasn't about tulips anymore. It was about status and speculation, a collective illusion that this time is different. But when the first few capybaras couldn't find buyers, trust vanished. And in finance, when trust goes, everything sinks faster than a capybara in a mudslide. When the swamp finally sobered up, the Capybara Council tried to step in. They proposed forgiving half the contracts to stop chaos. But by then, no one trusted any decree. The damage was done. Some blamed the brokers, some blamed foreign traders, some blamed the weather. But the truth was simpler. The wetlands had fallen in love with easy leaves. In the end, tulips bloomed again, beautiful, silent, and humble. But no one treated them like treasure anymore.
When everyone around you says a leaf will double tomorrow, go for a swim instead.
Because economic bubbles aren't about tulips or tech stocks or bamboo futures. They're about the eternal capybara weakness, believing we can skip effort and buy meaning. Centuries later, the same pattern returned, in new disguises. The leaf stock bubble, when capybaras traded reed company shares like lottery tickets. The great wetland housing craze, when huts doubled in price every moon cycle. The NFT, nice floral tulip, boom, when they started selling pictures of flowers instead of flowers themselves. Different objects, same illusion, that price will always rise because everyone says so. Tulip mania was the first great mirror held up to that delusion. Modern economists in the wetlands study this event not for its scale. The losses were tiny compared to later collapses, but for its symbolism. Tulip mania became the template for every bubble since. Hype over value, leverage over logic, collective confidence over common sense. In human terms, it was the prototype of every .com, housing, and crypto craze that would follow centuries later, except with fur, reeds, and more mud baths. Today, tulips still bloom across the Dutch wetlands. They've long lost their speculative shine. They're just flowers again, honest, temporary, breathtaking. And that might be the final wisdom of Lily's world. Beauty isn't meant to be owned, traded, or leveraged. It's meant to be looked at for a brief moment before it fades. Because unlike leaves, beauty doesn't compound. It simply reminds. Reminds that every bubble begins with wonder and ends when we forget what wonder was for. If you strip away all the fur and metaphor, here's what the tulip bubble taught every capybara economist since. Markets are emotional swamps. Logic floats, but fear and greed control the currents. Speculation spreads faster than knowledge. By the time you hear of easy leaves, the pond's already drying up. Everything makes sense until it doesn't. Every bubble feels rational until the music stops. And the rarest flower of all is discipline. Because in every swamp, there's a lily planting hope where reason should grow. So next time someone promises you infinite leaves from a single bulb, smile, nod, and check if they're standing on mud. Because the wetlands still whisper the same warning carried for centuries through cattails. The brighter the bloom, the quicker the wilt.